Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. Emma and I had been married for 6 years. Our life seemed perfect, until the cracks began to show. The first time I noticed something was off, it was small. It always is, isn't it? A forgotten detail, a strange tone in her voice. "Hey babe," Emma said one night as she pulled her coat over her shoulders. "I'm heading out to meet Zoe. Girls' night." I looked up from my laptop. "Zoe? Since when do you two hang out one-on-one?" She hesitated, smoothing her hair. "She's been going through a tough time. I just want to be there for her." It sounded plausible enough, but something about the way she avoided my gaze left a sour taste in my mouth. Still, I didn't push it. I wanted to believe her. Zoe was an old college friend of Emma's, someone who'd been in and out of her life over the years. Recently, Zoe had gone through a rough divorce. Messy, loud, and full of drama. She'd been leaning on Emma for support, which I didn't mind. Helping a friend in need is what you do. But Emma's sudden involvement in Zoe's life seemed over the top. Almost like it was an excuse for something else. Over the next few months, Emma seemed to have an endless supply of excuses. Late-night meetings, errands that stretched for hours, sudden weekend plans with friends I'd never heard of. I chalked it up to her being busy. After all, running her photography business wasn't easy. But the distance between us grew wider with each unexplained absence. One evening, I decided to call her out. "Emma," I said as we sat down for dinner, "you've been different lately. Distant. What's going on?" Her fork paused midway to her mouth. "Different? What do you mean?" "You're gone all the time. You barely talk to me anymore." She sighed, setting her fork down. "Liam, I've just been overwhelmed. Work is crazy, and Zoe, you know how she gets. It's nothing to worry about." I wanted to believe her. I needed to. But deep down, I knew she was lying. The gnawing suspicion wouldn't let go, and I decided I couldn't ignore it any longer. 2 days later, when Emma said she was heading out to help Zoe, I followed her. I stayed far enough behind her car to avoid being seen, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter with every turn she made. Eventually, she parked in front of a quiet cafe on the edge of town. I waited, heart pounding, as she stepped out and walked inside. A few moments passed before I saw her. Not with Zoe, but with a man. They sat in a corner booth, leaning in close, speaking in hushed tones. At one point, she reached out to touch his hand, and he smiled in a way that made my stomach churn. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of them together, capturing the man's face as well. I could already feel the familiar weight of doubt settle in. If I asked her about who that man was, I knew she would never tell me the truth. She'd lie. She'd spin some excuse, some reason that would only deepen my doubt without revealing anything real. I had to be smarter than that. When I got home, I knew I needed help. The next morning, I hired a private investigator. The investigator worked quickly. Within a week, I had a full report in my hands. The man was Ryan, Emma's ex-boyfriend from before we got married. He'd been back in town for months, and they'd been meeting regularly. As I read through the report, a sickening realization settled over me. Their meetings weren't random. They weren't casual catch-ups. There was something more to it, something I hadn't fully understood yet. I felt the urge to confront her, to demand answers right then and there. But I held back, knowing that this was only the beginning. I needed more evidence to prove what I was starting to suspect. I couldn't afford to make a move until I had everything in place. I waited a few days, forcing myself to act like nothing was happening. Emma was still coming and going with her usual excuses, but I kept my distance emotionally, watching her more carefully than ever. The private investigator I'd hired kept tailing them, gathering information. His updates started coming more frequently. Later that week, I received a call from him. "I've got something," he said, his voice low, almost as if he was trying to suppress excitement. I followed Emma and Ryan again. They were at that same cafe, but this time, they kissed. Liam. I got photos. My stomach dropped as I clenched the phone tighter. "Where are they now?" "They headed to Ryan's place. I have more pictures." My mind raced. I had the proof I needed now. I felt like a weight had been lifted, but the anger quickly replaced it. I couldn't confront her yet, not until I had more to expose everything, completely and in one go. Later that night, I couldn't wait any longer. Emma had gone to take a shower, leaving her phone on the kitchen counter. I knew this was my chance. My hands shook slightly as I picked it up and unlocked it, praying I wouldn't get caught. At first it was innocent, texts with her friends, a few work emails, but then I stumbled upon something that made my breath catch in my throat. There it was. A message from Ryan. "You're still sure about this? It's getting risky." Her reply sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Don't worry. Liam's too distracted to notice. We'll be fine." My hands trembled as I scrolled through more messages. There were dozens. Texts about their plans, coded language about the move and getting out. They were making arrangements to take everything from me, piece by piece. Money, assets. They even talked about selling my car to start over. Emma had been playing a role in this twisted scheme for longer than I could have imagined. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My world, my marriage, everything I thought was secure. It was all a lie. I had to stay calm. I couldn't let her know I'd found this. Not yet. As I read through one of the texts, I suddenly heard the sound of the bathroom door creaking open. My heart raced. I quickly closed the Messages app and slid her phone back onto the counter, trying to act casual, like nothing had happened. She glanced at me briefly but said nothing, as if everything was fine. But I knew it wasn't. My chest tightened as the realization of Emma's betrayal sank in deeper. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover, more damage she had already done. Fueled by suspicion, I decided to check our joint bank account. My heart sank the moment I logged in. $50,000 was missing, transferred to an unfamiliar private account. I stared at the transaction details, my mind racing. It had been done a few days earlier, carefully timed, likely when she thought I wouldn't notice. I couldn't believe it. I spent the rest of the night planning my next move. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about taking back control, protecting everything I'd worked for. I couldn't let them get away with this. I had to expose them, but I also needed to be strategic. If I confronted Emma now, she'd spin her lies and try to deny everything. But if I waited, gathered more proof, and showed her for what she really was, then I'd be ready. And when the time came, I wouldn't hold back. The next morning, Emma went for a run. She left her phone on the kitchen counter again. I quickly grabbed it and I forwarded every message they'd exchanged to myself. Everything about their plans, their coded language, their future. I saved it all. They thought they were being clever, but I was smarter. When I was done, I deleted our conversation history, making sure there was no trace of what I'd done. I didn't want to leave her any clues. I placed her phone back exactly where it had been, making it seem as if nothing had changed. I exhaled, trying to steady myself. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. She would lie, spin her web of excuses, and I'd be back to square one. But with this evidence, I had something solid, something irrefutable. It wasn't just my word against hers anymore. I spent the rest of the day putting things in motion, carefully planning my next steps. First, I reached out to my lawyer. I knew I had to protect myself, my assets, before Emma and Ryan could get their hands on anything. We'd been married for 6 years, and I'd built a successful career before we met. She had always been supportive, but now I saw it for what it was, a partnership built on deception. The lawyer advised me to document everything, separate assets where possible, and prepare for the inevitable divorce. I took careful notes, ensuring I wasn't blindsided when the time came. Every penny mattered, and I wasn't about to let Emma walk away with everything. That night I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photos and messages I'd saved. The weight of it all was overwhelming, but I couldn't let it break me. I was done being the fool. I knew that confronting her would need to be done carefully, so I played my part, acted like everything was normal. I made dinner, helped with the laundry, and carried on as though nothing had changed. But I had enough of the lies, the betrayal. I wasn't going to let Emma and Ryan get away with this. So I gathered all the evidence, photos, messages, recordings, and even proof of the $50,000 missing from our joint bank account, and went straight to the police. I made sure they understood the severity of the situation and handed over everything I had. They assured me they'd investigate, but I wasn't leaving anything to chance. This wasn't just about exposing them. It was about ensuring they faced the consequences for everything they'd done. The next day, Emma went for another run, and once again she left her phone behind. I couldn't resist. I checked her messages and found a new text from Ryan. "Tonight, 8 p.m. My place. My blood boiled as I read it. I immediately called the police and told them about their plan. They agreed this was the perfect opportunity to catch them red-handed and organized a sting operation. That night I waited in my car just down the street, my heart pounding as I watched the lights in Ryan's house flicker on. I knew Emma would be there soon enough. As she pulled into the driveway, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. When the police officers moved in, I followed them, staying a few steps behind. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but what I saw through the window shocked me. Emma and Ryan were sitting on the couch laughing like they had no care in the world, completely unaware of the storm coming for them. Then the door was kicked open. The police barged in, guns drawn. "Liam?" Emma's voice cracked as she turned toward me. "What are you doing here?" "Surprised?" I said, stepping into the room, my fists clenched. "I thought you'd be smarter than this, but then again, you always were good at lying." Ryan jumped to his feet, trying to play it cool, but I saw the fear in his eyes. The cops had him cornered. They didn't need me to say a word. "Emma," one of the officers said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and theft. You have the right to remain silent." I couldn't help myself. The anger I had been holding in for so long exploded out. "You think you could just take everything from me and walk away? All for what? A few years of sneaking around? You're pathetic." Emma looked at me with cold, bitter eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. "I hate you," she spat, her words sharp like daggers. "I never loved you. I only married you for your money. You were just a means to an end." I stood frozen, but she wasn't finished. "You never satisfied me, Jake," she continued, her voice growing louder. "In bed, in life, in everything. I settled for you because you were safe, and you never saw it. You were always too blind to see how little I cared about you." Every word she said was like a punch to the gut, but I couldn't let her see how much it hurt. "You made a big mistake, Emma," I said, my voice steady, but the bitterness still biting at the edges. "You thought you could take everything from me, but you were wrong." She sneered at me, still defiant. "Whatever, Jake. You never deserved me. Ryan and I will be better off without you." The officers stepped forward to cuff her, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the woman I thought I knew. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was pure contempt. Then they cuffed Ryan, the man who had plotted with her to destroy me. A strange sense of satisfaction washed over me. I watched them being led out of the house in cuffs, their faces pale, their lives unraveling in front of them. They hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated that I'd be one step ahead. As the officers drove away, I stood in Ryan's front yard, staring at the place where my life had fallen apart. Emma wasn't the person I thought she was, and Ryan had been a wolf in sheep's clothing from the start. The truth had come out. They'd been caught red-handed, but there was still something gnawing at me. The damage had been done, and even though I had exposed their betrayal, I couldn't escape the ache of knowing the woman I loved had been so willing to destroy everything for greed. In the following days, as the legal process unfolded, I watched as Emma and Ryan tried to spin their stories. But it didn't matter. I had all the evidence, the proof that would send them both to jail for their crimes. The police had taken it from here, and soon Emma would be facing the consequences of her actions. And me? I'd be rebuilding my life. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a while, I felt a sense of peace. I had taken back control. I had fought for everything I had, and in the end, I'd won. Thank you for watching.